Hi, everyone. Welcome to another of our webinar series brought to you by Filter Science. My name is Jason Hadley, and I am one of the sales managers over here at Filter. And today we are covering the basics of standard operating procedures for indoor agriculture. We're coming up with a guide for building consistent processes for quality management, training, and profitability. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's cover some of the things that we'll be covering on our webinar today. First and foremost, what are standard operating procedures? Why are they important to your cannabis facility operations? Employees and where standard operating procedures can fail, something else we'll be covering. As well, how to prepare for writing a standard operating procedure. Part 4 will cover parts of the standard operating procedure, and lastly, we'll do a run through of a finished standard operating procedure. So before we dive into the meat and potatoes of all this, let me give you a little background around who we are, what we do. Filter is manufactured by a company called Lighthouse Worldwide Solutions. We are headquartered in Fremont, California. We do research and development, pilot production, service and installation, finance, accounting, quality assurance, and have been 35 years deep now in selling real-time particle monitoring systems for pharmaceutical cleanroom applications. We are manufactured out of Medford, Oregon, where we also do calibration and instrumentation services. We do system builds and designs. We do system services, quality assurance, and of course, project management. To give you a little bit of our, to put the worldwide in Lighthouse Worldwide Solutions, we do have several offices around the world, including, again, our headquarters in Fremont, manufacturing out of Oregon, a training center in Arizona, calibration out of Philadelphia, along with global offices in Thailand, Malaysia, the Netherlands, and Turkey. Some of the markets that we serve include our semiconductor industries, aerospace, automotive, pharmaceutical, medical device manufacturing, and of course, in this case, horticulture as well. Some of our notable clients over the years have been Bayer, Merck, Johnson & Johnson, Glaxo, Pfizer, Novartis within the life sciences sector, electronics. We've been working with NASA for decades, Apple, Raytheon, Intel, etc. And in indoor agriculture, we've been working with such notables as the Jungle Boys, Suniva, Tweed, the Cookies conglomerate, Cannabis, and Happy Healing Farms. So let's get into the basics of a standard operating procedure. Now, it looks and sounds complicated, but not always the case once you break it down. So let's start with what is a standard operating procedure and who uses them. So a standard operating procedure is in effect your daily operations playbook for all of the processes within your facility. So that said, it's like about consistent processes make for consistent outcomes. It's sort of, if you will, your playbook for the day-to-day operations of your company. But a wide variety of industries use standard operating procedures, such as manufacturing, warehousing, the hotel and hospitality industry. Universities use standard operating procedures, as well as the restaurants industries. So some of the benefits of a standard operating procedure, you would benefit wildly to begin deploying these within your facility or within your organization. For one, you get consistency of process. They're great for employee training, as you have a template from which you can onboard everybody. You have operational efficiency that comes into play. You avoid miscommunications. You certainly increase the safety of your workplace. There's also regulatory compliance factors that come into play. You can transfer the work easily to those who may not necessarily be completely familiar with the work. If it's all laid out point by point, process by process, it makes it easy to be able to just simply hand it off to somebody. This is also an opportunity to catch any mistakes or any potential liabilities that are within your process. You now have a paper trail for accountability and tracking, and you can use these processes to begin to scale up operations should the time come to pass. These are all part of, or SOPs are part of GMP or CGMP, current good manufacturing processes, current good manufacturing practices, whatever you want that P to be. Which is, again, kind of sort of a holistic view of how your facility operates from a personnel and training and competency standpoint, from management, commitment, and continual improvement. You're assessing risks within your facility. You're deploying quality management systems. You're managing your site and your facilities. And ultimately, you're controlling the product that comes out of that. And all of that is ultimately designed to result in profitability, right? So that said, where can one apply standard operating procedures? Now, in this particular case with indoor cultivation, for example, indoor horticulture, indoor agriculture, you can apply standard operating procedures to any process or task you want done by your method and to your specifications without you having to be there to watch them do it. So this can apply to areas of facilities such as cloning, such as flower areas, drying and curing procedures, packaging areas of your facility, and then as well as the general cleaning practices of any of those areas I just mentioned and beyond, frankly. So employees and SOPs, where can they fail? Well, there's a number of ways in which they can fail. Some of the more notables include that employees don't believe in the process, that they're not properly enrolled, not seeing the impact of their work on customers, that we want to create a teamwork environment, a morale-based environment, not having a sense of ownership, thinking that they can get away with laxity. It's very common in indoor agriculture industries where you're just sort of sitting around waiting for plants to grow, right? You think you can get away with a lot of stuff, but unfortunately, as the nature of indoor agriculture industries have changed to become more in the vein of CGMP and living somewhere between pharmaceutical production and food production, you're actually unfortunately going to have to treat this like a job. Sorry. Sometimes, however, on the plus side, an SOP might fail because an employee wants to innovate something. Perhaps they come up with a better way to do it. And perhaps there should be a process in place where if someone wants to submit a way to build a better mousetrap, if you will, that you have that into account and don't let them just go maverick on your SOP because it could disrupt the process or can affect something else later down the production line. Oftentimes SOPs will fail if employees are not properly trained. Very common. Oftentimes employees are locked into their little box, right, of just what they do from day to day, and they're not seeing the impact of what they're doing on the larger picture across the entirety of the facility. So sometimes that helps to kind of teach your employees that, yes, this SOP needs to be done this way at this time. However, this is what it actually leads to down the line. Oftentimes employees can be disengaged. Again, this comes down to employee morale, and some of it kind of starts to creep into leadership and CEO management 101. But at the end of the day, you have to make sure that your employees are fully engaged in this process. Sometimes, of course, an SOP can fail because the process is too complicated and it needs to be broken down into smaller bite-sized nuggets. Oftentimes then there is the other side of this, that where I'm kind of pointing at you guys, the viewers here, that sometimes an SOP will fail because leadership will deviate from the process. It's very common where management will come into a facility not properly gowned, not properly adhering to certain procedures, and that sets the tone and example where we can go back to employees thinking that they can get away with laxity. So if you want to see the change, you have to be the change. So in preparing to write your standard operating procedures, there's just a couple of things that need to be taken into account. Number one, you want to observe the procedure. So you want to observe the procedure from the very start. So how is the procedure prepared for before someone performs it? What steps in the process allow for employees to make choices, right? If we can eliminate choice, then that procedure gets followed a lot more cleanly. What steps in the process allow for or promote cross-contamination, distractions, or safety risks? If you, in observing your procedure, you want to know, how is the work verified that it has been done correctly? And lastly, in observing the procedure, the more eyes you have on it, the better. A team environment will definitely help foster, individual talents where people are seeing things from different perspectives. So, for example, if you're noticing here, the photo that's on this slide, and you're wondering, okay, well, where's the safety violation there? Some might point to one particular area that's glaringly obvious, but yes, of course, it's also noted that the guy in the blue sweater isn't wearing hearing protection, right? I think we can all agree on that. So one of the things that you want to do besides watching the process go through is you want to be able to chart this process. You want to be able to create a basic flow chart of what you can, of how this procedure will take place. So in some cases, you do have decision moments where somebody has to evaluate and repeat another step, or you can do it in a linear fashion going from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. Whichever process you feel comfortable with. But again, oftentimes you want to eliminate choice. All right. So when it comes to the basic elements of an SOP, special focus should be placed on writing it for the person that's actually using it. So you do need to write this in the language. You need to consider your audience, is what it comes down to. So that said, you want to keep the writing simple, brief, and clear. Clarity is of absolute importance, keeping it simple so it's easily understood, and making it brief. So if a procedure needs to be broken down into a couple of standard operating procedures, well, you have the opportunity to do that. And in some cases, it definitely helps provide that clarity and keep things simple. The language that you use, you want to get into specific actions. So for example, you would say mop the floor versus clean the floor. You want to eliminate ambiguity. Again, going back to language that avoids potential decision making. So language such as using the word must, you must do something this way versus you may do something this way, because it allows a backdoor for an employee to, deviate from the procedure. So lastly, of course, you want to keep it impersonal, avoiding the word you. So some of the things here that you can see as far as the basic elements of SOP, obviously a good title lets the reader know exactly what the subject is. You want to avoid any overlap and redundancy between procedures and alignment issues by having a clearly defined scope. What is the scope of this work? You want to let the audience know upfront the purpose of the procedure. Is it a process? Is it an action? Is it a task? Is it specific to a location? Definitions of specific terms are also really, really important to be able to, again, help add that clarity and demystify any of the language within your SOP. So definitions to ensure the reader is interpreting the terms correctly. You also want to clearly define the roles and responsibilities of who should be involved. And that's not just in the preparation and execution of the procedure, but also in the follow-up and the validation and the signing off of it as well. You also want to make sure that you're listing out any potential materials that you would need in order for the reader of that SOP to perform the task, and make sure that they're using the correct items and making sure that they're using those items correctly. The procedure itself is obviously key to this whole thing, because you want to be able to detail a step-by-step on how to actually perform the process, an action or a task that is to be performed. Any references would be really important as well. If your standard operating procedure includes you referring back to any specific manuals or instructions or something else, you want to be able to make sure that those are tied in as well. And finally, you do want a detailed revision history, because that provides a history of the changes from version to version and with all of the justifications included. The nice thing about a standard operating procedure is it is a little bit of a living, breathing document. You are going to be able to make amendments as you go along. Things will change, regulations will change, processes will change. You'll incorporate a new product into your process, and you need to be able to account for those and be able to track the revision histories, so that if someone wants to refer back to how it was done previously in order to make the change for how it should be done now, that information is available to them. So let's write an SOP. Let's write an SOP. So we're going to do a sample standard operating procedure on changing a filter HEPA cartridge. Filter, obviously the company here that's presenting our webinar today, is a portable clean room grade air filter that will provide 10,000 cubic feet with 3.5 air exchanges per hour, removing plant and people pathogens to keep work areas safe for both final product and processes, as well as your most important asset, your people. So let's talk about how one would go about clarifying the process of changing a HEPA drum out of one of our filter revolution units. So, for example, we would include the title. Our title would be Filter HEPA Cartridge Changeout. Pretty simple. The scope. Filter removes airborne plant pathogens as part of the facility-wide microbe control program. So again, we're speaking to the entirety of how this one little thing plays into the bigger picture that goes on within the facility. The purpose, our purpose here is to minimize the release of microbes during the HEPA cartridge changeout process. So in other words, just to give you some background, as you're changing a filter, you will jostle loose particles, and you want to be able to prevent those particles from being reintroduced into the environment. Incidentally, this is the same type of purpose that you would employ in changing your HVAC filtration as well. When you remove the filter out of your HVAC units in-house, if not done so carefully, you can, of course, reintroduce particles that were caught in the filter back into the environment. So as far as definitions are concerned, we're including a couple of definitions here. IPA, isopropyl alcohol. The other one would be HEPA filter, just because somebody might go, what does HEPA stand for? HEPA stands for high efficiency particulate air. So we're just defining those terms just for the sake of clarity. Now, as far as the roles are concerned, let's just say we're including a section lead on a cultivation facility and the assistant to perform that change. And then, of course, the cultivation director would be the one who approves the work being performed. With regard to materials, we have fresh disposable gloves we'll be using, one garbage bag, replacement HEPA cartridge in box, 70% IPA in a spray bottle. And it's also a good place to add any safety equipment needed as well. So we're going to assume that this filter is on its casters, on the ground. However, filter is designed to be hung horizontally or mounted vertically within critical areas. So if there's an opportunity to include taking that down and whatever ladders and assistants and ratchets, what have you, that are needed in order to free that filter from its mounting point, you'll want to include those types of things as well. Incidentally, and just for your knowledge, your fun fact for the day, 70% IPA. You're wondering why 70% versus 90%? Well, 70% IPA has more water to it, so it allows for a slower evaporation time, which then allows for greater contact time. So some people do ask that at times. Let's see. Also, let's go on to the next slide. Where did we go? We lost ourselves here. There we go. The procedure. Here's the procedure. So a section lead and assistant would put on fresh gloves. The section lead would unplug this and spray the wheels, unplug the HEPA unit. So that's an edit we can add there later on down the line in a further revision. Unplugs and sprays the wheels of the HEPA of the filter unit for complete coverage with IPA before filter is moved to the hallway. So the assistant would unlock the clasps, would remove the top cover and hold on to it. You would not, again, here's a warning here that's part of this particular step, that you would not want to touch the inside of the top cover. That inside of the top cover could have potential particles inside that you don't want to touch transfer to another part of the facility. The section lead would then place a garbage bag over the entirety of the filter unit. The section lead would then grab the HEPA cartridge from the outside of the bag, and the section lead would lift the old HEPA cartridge out, closing off the bag as the old HEPA cartridge clears the top of the filter unit. The section lead would then open the replacement cartridge and insert in place of the old one. The assistant would replace and lock the top cover in place. The assistant would then take the bagged up old HEPA cartridge to the trash area. The section lead would spray the wheels with IPA for complete coverage before returning the filter unit to the service location, and then, of course, turn it on, make sure that it's operating. And then finally, the cultivation director would sign off on the task as complete. So again, keep in mind, these are living, breathing documents. These are going to have further revisions down the road. And just these sections, these steps here, you may have been looking at these going, well, wait a minute, what about this? Wait a minute, what about that? Wait a minute, what about here and there and what have you? Yes, This is all good stuff because every time you make a revision, you're further refining your process, okay? Until you're getting it down to a science. So, and lastly, of course, you'd want to include any reference materials. So, for instance, in this case, in changing a HEPA filter, we've included the filter user manual. And let's just say your facility has some sort of larger policies and procedures book around microbe control. You would want to include that as a reference as well. And then as well, any flow charts, any pictures, any diagrams. It's always great to show somebody what something should look like at the end of the procedure, or any pictures of intermittent steps along the way. Then finally, there's going to be the sign off. This is where the cultivation lead would, sign off and date it. And then of course, the revision history would remain unchanged if there hasn't been a revision since, but if there's been a revision, then of course you want to note those along the way. So at the end, what you're left with is a completed SOP, right? As you can see here from this one pager, you can see who it's authorized by. You can see the last review date, the last revision date, that it's a standard operating procedure. The title is there. Again, we have all of our major parts, our scope, our purpose, our definitions, our roles, our materials, our procedure, our references. It's been signed off. And of course, we have the revision history up in the header. Again, you're continually wanting to test and revise your SOPs as needed. And frankly, it's really that simple. Once you have all of the major parts in place, you just simply drop in the information that you need and revise as needed. So to kind of recap what we've done here, we've taken standard operating procedures and explained that they're used in a wide range of industries and that they're designed to build consistency in your daily process. We've also covered to properly prepare and craft your SOPs with detail in the process and the potential hazards in mind. As well, you want to properly prepare and craft your SOPs with the audience in mind. You want to make it simple, you want to make it clear, you want to eliminate choice. If your employees aren't following your standard operating procedures, could it be a problem with the SOP? Could it be a problem with the employee? Could it be a problem with both? Worth noting. Finally, we want to regularly review, test, and track revisions of your SOPs. And honestly, that's pretty much it. So I do want to open up the time to questions and answers. I also want to make sure that everyone's aware that we do have a survey after this. And if you can help us out by helping to refine our standard operating procedure of how we present webinars to you, we're always looking for those types of suggestions and being able to poke holes in our process to deliver a better product, a final better product for you. Lastly, of course, we're always open to suggestions around topics. So if there's a topic that you feel that should be covered, I am more than happy to take that into account and see how we can deliver that to our webinar viewers going forward. So I do have a question here. Where can I get my help? Where can I get help writing my SOPs? Great question. Now, on one hand, yeah, we've provided you with a simple solution to be able to start to do this on your own. However, there are companies that specialize in writing SOPs specific. The only kind of catch in this is that particularly in indoor agriculture, there's not like one standard way of doing things. A lot of people, what makes indoor agriculture cultivators so successful is that they often bring a nuance to their process that their competitors don't. That being said, there's also a lot of ways to skin that cat, and I feel sorry for the cats. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, if you were going to get help from somebody writing your SOP, I would not just simply say, I need help writing an SOP on cleaning a flower room or cleaning a tissue culture lab. They're going to want to know more information. They're going to want to observe your process, because essentially all they're doing is they're going to be observing your process, flow charting it out, dropping it into a step-by-step and all of the equipment and materials needed. And then you're going to be off and running to the races based on that. And then you can obviously, again, go back and make changes from there. Just trying to see if there's any other questions. Oh, and for what it's worth, I just also do want to mention that we'll be providing a link of this webinar, as well as at that link, we'll have a downloadable template. This very template that you saw a couple slides back will be available for you. The presentation, yes, will be made available after the seminar. And as far as any other guides or helpful information we can share, we actually have past webinars that we've done. We have other webinars that are coming up. So there's going to be a lot of information that's going to be coming down the pipeline for you guys. Let's see here. How can we find a master grower or horticulturalist in New York? Good question. Is there a standard operating procedure for finding a grower or a horticulturist in New York? Perhaps not. However, some of the things I might suggest, even though we're getting a little off topic here, are that, LinkedIn is a great resource. Working with, if you have any cultivators in your area, horticulturists in your area, growers in your area, that, word of mouth is great. I mean, I can tell you that Filter is a great product all day long. I would be just merely bragging. But if you asked any of my customers how Filter's doing in their facility, that is proof. Okay, that is proof. So let's see here. Is there anything else in the, did we get that question answered? I'm hoping we got that question answered. All right, so let's see here. Just checking to see if there's any other questions that are coming in here before we wrap up. Oh, okay. So this is probably a process specific question, but the question that came in was, does each room need a dedicated wet and dry shop vac? And yeah, I mean, that's something that I've talked about previously on my Instagram posts. If you're interested in following and more microbe control content for indoor agriculture, you can find me on Instagram at DyslexiCStoner402, as you can see here on the slide here. So we're talking about perhaps maybe a cleaning SOP, right? So as part of a cleaning SOP, to answer the question, yeah, you would want dedicated vacuums for both your wet and your dry processes, as well as the fact that you would want dedicated shop vacs for individual rooms. So, and that's something that's careful to note in your SOPs as well, is that you don't want to create opportunities for cross-contamination. So if you're observing your cleaning process and you're seeing somebody take a shop vac from one area that's using it to pick up leaves and then is using it to suck up water, and then is taking that very shop vac to another room to execute the same process, well, now you have found a potential risk within your process. You found a potential point of contamination control that can proliferate throughout the facility, and obviously eliminating risks is super key here, because again, particularly in indoor agriculture where products are tested prior to making it to retail shelves, you want to have your game super tight, because you don't want to find out that you have a mold problem when you're submitting for retail testing. That's not the time to find out. You want to be able to find these, discover those problems far earlier in the process through regular testing, particle counting, air and surface sampling. Those are things that we cover in other webinars. Let's see here. Another question that came in, where can I find resources on how to get my facility to a food and pharma level? Great question. There's a lot out there. You can, for one, where I would start? Okay, so here's a couple of things I would start. Get out a pencil, take some notes. So first thing I would do is I would look up what's called 21 CFR Part 211. This is the guidelines for manufacturing finished pharmaceuticals, and this is what the FDA will use as a guide for compliance, right? Again, if you heard me mention before, you want to live somewhere between pharma production and food production, somewhere in that neighborhood, as close to pharma as you can get based on your current budget. The other thing you'll want to note as well is what's called USP 797. These are the standards and guidelines for, I'm trying to make sure I word this right, for like essentially nutraceuticals, if you will, or non-sterile compounding facilities is actually more accurate. So those are two different guidelines that you can use in order to understand what the expectations should be and the types of materials that would use. And then the other thing I would do, which was something I kind of discovered on my own, is there are plenty of websites that offer free textbooks, like college level textbooks. And there are a myriad of options around microbe control, standard operating procedures, regulatory compliance, both that live at the pharmaceutical and at the food grade levels. So if you just did a simple search in Google for a PDF library, I think you'd be well served and you'd find a lot of hits. You can also reach out to me directly. I have a whole slew of these titles that I've been saving along the way that I pass off to employees constantly. I can set you up with a library of like 50 titles, like straight up. I can save you a lot of time. So you have my email here, jhadley@golighthouse.com. This is where you can reach me directly, as well as, of course, feel free to send me a direct message through Instagram as well. I'm always happy to do that, and I'll get an email address from you, and I'll send something to you via WeTransfer. You know, it's like 700 megabytes of material, so, you know, in various PDF textbooks. But at the end of the day, that is a very simple way to build a very large reference library that will likely be able to answer some of the high-level questions. And a lot of these books are written by people with PhD after their name, right? I mean, in indoor agriculture as an industry, we have to eliminate what's called bro science. We have to eliminate my buddy says, because my buddy says will oftentimes get your room killed or will lead to compliance issues or what have you. So to find resources on how to get your facility to a food and pharma level, again, look to the regulatory compliance requirements for industries that live at a higher regulatory requirement than you. And number two, you'd be surprised what you can find for free on a PDF library search site. And if you want a link to that library search site, you can always, of course, reach me there. I have a couple of them that I send out that I even regularly check for new titles that kind of come online and the types of keywords that you'd be looking for. So let's move on to another question here. And I'm sure we'll likely be wrapping up soon. When an employee wants to make a recommendation for an SOP that maybe does not exist in the company currently, do you have a recommendation for a process for submission? Well, I think some of that's a great question. And I think that, let me read this question again, just to make sure I'm answering right. Do you have a process or recommendation for the submission? Honestly, it depends on the company's hierarchy and infrastructure. There are some people who are tied very directly to their superiors and the people who work and write their SOPs and what have you. And you can simply tell somebody or set up a meeting time or send them an email and say, hey, I think we should do this, we should do that. In other places, you may have a form in place where, and it might even be worth noting on your SOP, for any ideas, recommendations, or what have you, put it in writing and send it to here, and we'll follow up with you and we'll work it through. Because sometimes, of course, you know, within an email, you don't get to create the level of context that you need to create in order to really kind of sell this innovation that you're looking to implement. However, at the end of the day, it's like, you know, you need to foster a team environment within your facilities. It's absolutely critical. Within clean room environments, it is par for the course that everybody from a team perspective context is able to point out, hey, you're not doing this according to the procedure, you're not doing that according to the procedure. You don't have to be mean about it. You don't have to be unprofessional about it. There's a professional way in order to make sure that you're keeping everybody on track. And if you foster an environment, an internal company culture of teamwork, those types of things will naturally develop and you'll be able to like help everybody reach up to get to a higher level of operational standard. Also, I do want to just take a moment to remind everybody that in about 24 hours, we'll be sending them, we're going to be sending you guys the link with the slides, the video, and the SOP template. So if you do want to perhaps take this back to your employees or do a training day with them, you kind of have something packaged and all ready to go. Let's see. Okay, so another submission came in. I have one in place, but sometimes it seems we have to work backwards to play catch up as we expand quickly. It's a hybrid of the email and form approach, but I like to hear what others recommend. So this is a great suggestion. Yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's like if you can catch it at the front of the procedure, fantastic, and you can revise and then implement from there. But oftentimes you don't necessarily see that option or availability to you until you're in the thick of that particular procedure. So again, it's up to you guys as a company to be able to set up that hierarchy and that structure to be able to do that. And hey, listen, not for nothing, but those employees that are sending you submissions, those are the guys you want to keep your eyes on if you're looking to promote from within. For storing SOPs, any good software recommendations? No. And by the way, man, I love the questions. The questions are great. So storing SOPs, we got a few options on this because this has been asked in when we've done this webinar previously to other audiences. So yeah, I mean, for right now, as you're not necessarily most in just indoor agriculture industries, I'll say many indoor agriculture industries, many in particular that are involved in the audience here today, there's not a lot of regulation around how this is done. Now, come federal legalization, come federal regulations start to be deployed within the industry, you're going to be mandated on how this has to be stored. So for one, I mean, so until that time, however, I would say, storing SOPs in a written form in a notebook for the employee facing side of things would be really great. I would make it a point to laminate those pages if you can, because people that are turning pages within a book, their fingers, remember your hand, the common hand has 10,000 microbes per square inch. So in cases of handling the SOP notebook itself, you want something that's easily cleanable that you can disinfect, because if a lot of people are going to this book, you're creating a microbe control hazard. So then what's the other answer to that? The other answer to that is to store it on a computer, in a database, on a separate drive, on a hard drive, something that's easily accessible by not just the person who wrote it. You want multiple people to be able to have access to this, because the last thing you want is to go on vacation and then suddenly somebody needs something done that's only you have access to, and now you're either A, unavailable and unable to be communicated with, or B, people are interrupting your vacation. You worked hard, you deserve the time off, right? So as far as, I mean, you can create these documents in Word and you can print them off as PDFs, and you can have them waiting for people as they show up to work as part of their daily work task. You can, depending on how many employees you have, if you have section leads or whatever, if they have a particular box, for example, that they have to check for memos, like, and I'm not talking like a checkbox on a form, I'm talking about like a cubby, if you will, some sort of storage space where you can, like, update them with company memos or what have you. You can just, before they even come into work, have them all printed off, have them all waiting for them in their inboxes, and then they pull them out. They go, okay, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do that. And then once they're done with them, they can simply put them in the recycle or put them in the trash or figure out a way to destroy them, so that they're not picked up and handled by anybody else. And again, potential microbes carried around other parts of the facility. So I hope I answered your question. Let's see if there's anything else that's coming up, and we'll give it another few seconds here, see if anybody has anything coming in. And it looks like at this point we may have answered everybody's questions. So let me also just reiterate that we have questions for you at the end of this. We want to know what your thoughts are on the quality of what we're presenting to you, the quality of the information. This smiling mug coming at you, what can we do to, like, make things more easily digestible and accessible to you? As well, please, we're always looking for topics that we want to cover that our audience wants to know. I mean, granted, yes, I sell air filtration, but let's be real. Air filtration is only one part of a larger, bigger picture of microbe control, which also includes, proper design and build out, proper diagnostic and remediation equipment like Filter. If you look at the top right corner, you've been looking at that logo all day for this entirety of our time together. And then as well as the training of the culture, creating a culture where your employees are not engaging in risk-based contamination control prone actions and processes and procedures. So it looks like here we are rounding out to be done for the day here. I'm not seeing anything else come through. Okay, cool. So again, please take our survey. Please suggest future topics, and allow me to just offer a hearty thank you for joining us today on learning the basics of building SOPs for indoor agriculture. Again, not difficult. Once you have all the parts, you assemble it up, and any new procedure that comes into place, you already have a template. And again, within the next 24 hours, you'll be receiving a link to this webinar. You'll be receiving a link that will not just the video, but the slides as well. And of course, please feel free to download our template and use it at your leisure. So that said, let me just make sure. Yes, I'm here. Amy, I'm mentioning you by name, calling you out by name. Please email me. I'm happy to send you whatever I got. All right. You guys are amazing. Thank you again for joining us today. I've been Jason Hadley, still Jason Hadley. I was Jason Hadley before we started, sales manager over at Filter Science. If I can answer any questions about air filtration and how to create a cleaner indoor air environment for your facility, for your business, for your home, for anybody that you care about, let me know. We're always happy to help. And with that, we're going to sign off and say goodbye and have a wonderful day. Thank you.